Oh gosh, you're out for Christmas and your voice starts
already rusty.
Yeah, very rusty. Nevertheless, we are live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good evening if you're on the East Coast. Welcome in. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Merry Christmas, good sir. Did you get anything exciting for Christmas?
So, my family's celebrating it today, so that's part of the reason why we're going early. The family was a little spread out yesterday, so we're doing it today. I don't know what I got. My girlfriend got me a nice new pair of golf shoes that I opened a couple of weeks ago. That was pretty nice. Did you get anything good?
Yeah, I got 2 framed signed.
Oh, you sent me
jerseys.
those were sick. Did you post a picture of that on Twitter?
I did not. But yes, and I got the 2 signed win jerseys. I got this new shirt, this long sleeve shirt. So Megan says, "Hey, you got to look dapper. If you're going to put your hair back, you can't look like a hobo." So just some clothes, but nobody had a better Christmas than Ben Ruffino, as Santa Claus left him a PlayStation, and I'm quoting, "We're murking fools." I don't know where he learns this stuff from, but everybody on Fortnite, and guess what his gamer tag is, by the way? I shouldn't say it. I'm not going to say it because he's 5. But
okay. Yeah, you don't want anyone adding him.
Just put it in there. I'm just going to put it in there. His name and LSU is in the gamer tag.
That was what my guess, or something with Burrow was going to be my guess.
No, but I'm just going to tell you it's pretty crazy. And then all of a sudden, Santa left a whole Target register for Baby Joel. So if you've ever seen I'm just spitballing here just in case somebody ever watches this, but I would assume that it took Santa about 4.5 hours to put the Target thing together. Let's just say I'm sure Santa had a really crazy Christmas.
Busy time.
Yeah, very.
Well, wait. What happened with those motorized cars that you were telling me about?
They're outside. Yeah, so they got motorized cars too, but that wasn't from us. Of course, they got motorized cars. We've ran into trees. We've bumped into one another. Ben's has a 4-wheel drive, and we live, out and about. So he goes in the mud and goes, "Watch this," and then he gets stuck and he goes, "This stinks," So it's been a crazy Christmas, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a weird couple of weeks of this weird dead period that we have of college football. I wish there were more games on Christmas Eve, but now is this really fun stretch of games where I know that we're not getting a lot of starters. I saw that Pitt's starting a kid who walked onto the team at quarterback that's from East Greenwich, Rhode Island, which is going to be pretty funny to watch. But there's still a lot of good football on today. I'm sick of trying to watch basketball. I need these damn playoff games to start up. Is it just me? These 10 days off in between games feels so long.
It does feel like a long time, very much a long time. But you say that, and then New Year's, you're like, thank God they're on for New Year's and New Year's Eve. But you're right there. And here's another thing. I wanted to ask you this. Well, you haven't had it yet. We had some interesting conversations at our table yesterday about college football. Did Mensa get the $8 million that everybody is reporting that he got? A lot of people believe that he did. And then we talked about college football playoff the entire rest of the time. I think the general fan, based off of my family that I listened to, I didn't talk really, but just listened to yesterday, they were pretty pissed off that the first round happened the way that it did.
I can understand that. I'm sure I did not have the same level of college football talk. Plenty of discussions with my dad, but the rest of my family's not as ingrained in the college football craziness like you and I are. But the Mensa thing's a very interesting conversation.
Yep.
I think a lot of people, anyone who questions it, don't realize how much money comes through the alumni of that Duke program. If all they really need is to get the investment of one alumni to pay that $8 million. That's it.
Well, I mean, look, you don't make an investment like that unless you either, number one, know that you'll get the money, or number two, it's very high incentivized, and he probably won't get to all of that. So there just comes a question where, did he get all of that money? But then number two, I think even at the table last night, people did not want to see Tennessee. They would have rather seen Ole Miss in there over Tennessee. So, I mean, there's a lot of
Wait, really? Old
Yeah,
Miss would have been more competitive. I don't know if
they wanted They said I did not say anything. Everybody wanted Ole Miss over Tennessee in the playoff.
That game would have been the same level of blowout if Ole Miss played in that game.
I disagree with that for this reason, because Jackson Dart is better than Nico right now. And then number two, I think that D-line that led the country in sacks would have given them a little bit more of an interesting game. To your point, I don't think Ohio State loses, right? Right. But I also don't think that Tennessee stays up. I think it would have been a better overall game. I see their point.
My counter to that, though, is that Ole Miss has such inconsistencies with running the football. If Dylan Sampson gets knocked out, obviously, early with the injury, if the backups to Dylan Sampson couldn't get going, I wouldn't have any faith that what would have happened is what we saw from the bad games that Lane Kiffin called, like the Florida game is a really good example. They can't run the ball, so he immediately abandons it. And then he's going up and Jackson Dart's throwing 50 times into a secondary that's one of the most talented in the country. So I see what you're saying. There's a path for it to have been close. I know you're not. That's a unique one, though. I'm surprised that folks would have been saying that. If anything, if we were to swap SEC teams, I would have thought that Alabama would have been more interesting.
Well, nobody in state Louisiana is going to put in Alabama for anything. Alabama did not come up once. Nobody gave two Rudy Poos.
Obviously.
But the other one was that they were pretty pissed off that Clemson was in there. Clemson was a big talking piece yesterday. Outside of the Netflix picture and the NFL games and it actually going somewhat smoothly, other than being just dud games, it seems as if that people didn't like the whole Clemson thing because – and I actually chimed in on this one just to be fair. They're 0-3 against the SEC and South Carolina beat them. Well, right? That would be the only counter argument that I have. But Ole Miss beat South Carolina, right? So, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know.
The bounce back to that, though, is Clemson played the most competitive game out of any of the quote underdogs in that first round matchup. So I actually had the least amount of a problem with Clemson because what caused the other two teams to get blown out so badly, and why when we've previewed the Arizona State and Boise State matchups, is that when it comes to playoff games, not having gifted players at O-line and D-line in your front seven at linebacker, when you got 5'11" linebackers that you're trotting out there because you just haven't recruited at the same level, you have no shot of winning. But when you've got Clemson's case, where they at least have Sammy Brown, who's a 5-star, DeMonte Capehart, who's going to be a top 75 pick. They have some freakish dudes. They just didn't play to their potential because they have a young receiving core and yada, yada, yada. That's why they lost the 3 games that they did. They at least had the bodies. I would, and this is where all the whole, consternation and the frustration and the belly aching, and I don't want to go back down this rabbit hole because I think a lot of people are tired of talking about, like, did SMU belong? Did Indiana belong? This is why we would rather have a 3-loss blue blood program, because if you have 5-star recruits, you're at least going to play a close game.
I agree. That was the talking points, but it's going to be interesting. So we got lots to get into. We're talking about Ryan Day and Ohio State, what it means if they win or lose. Rylie Mills is out for Notre Dame. Yeah. So we'll talk about that, the impact that they'll have there. Notre Dame also did get 2 wide receivers out of the portal. We'll talk about that. Fernando Mendoza is headed to Indiana. We'll talk about that and some other transfer portal news. Then we'll get to some of these bowl games here at the end, some of the ones that we're watching out for. I got to be real with you, Joe. The Birmingham Bowl with Georgia Tech and Vandy seems like it's going to be a fun game.
That's a really good pick. I'll save my thoughts on that for later, but you might have stolen mine already.
Well, I have 4. So there's a lot of interesting games that I want to watch. I am not the common fan who's like, oh, man, hey, everybody's in the portal. I'm not watching this. I'm not watching every single ball game. I literally, like, what was it? The one on New Year's Eve? Like, it was on, and we did a
Christmas Eve. It was the Hawaii Bowl that went into 5 overtimes.
I'm sitting there watching the Hawaii Bowl, man. Like, I'm not, I'm getting fired up about fireworks or whatever they were talking about. Anyway, all right, let's get moving. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share to all those groups. If you're on Facebook and to all those social media pages, you're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, we break down Notre Dame, Indiana, transfer portal, Ryan Day. So much to get into. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back! Just a quick programming note: if you do see something about this high come in here and start, we still do have. So I'm just. We might have
a guest appearance.
Yeah, we might have a guest
from
appearance.
Ben Ruffino.
Yeah, that is for sure. All right, let's get to it here. So, Joe, the second round of the playoffs are among us. They are here, within a week away. They are among us. And an interesting conversation piece has been about Ryan Day. What happens if he wins this game versus Oregon? What happens if he loses this game versus Oregon? I guess your thoughts on the perception of what's going on at Ohio State, Ryan Day. I mean, we saw on College Game Day that even fans were calling for him to be fired. Then they go out there and blast Tennessee. I guess, what are your thoughts about this whole Ryan Day thing, if he wins or if he loses against Oregon in the second go-around of this matchup this year?
Well, considering the reaction that we saw from Kirk Herbstreit trying to defend Ryan Day and then First Take aggressively coming back at him for getting called out, I think that's just the beginning of how massive this discussion is and can be. It's turned into one of the most compelling conversations because it's the most unique thing that's happened in the sport. I can't think of anything comparable for a head coach to have gone through what Ryan Day has, which is producing really good teams that have been really explosive, athletic, and dominant, and recruiting at a high level and playing the way that they did against Tennessee, but not being able to get past Michigan and falling short, not reaching the Big Ten championship game. I think that what we now sit in, and where I want to start this conversation, Blake, is what the heck does happen if they lose to Oregon again for a second time? I don't think that there's a world that they get blown out. I don't think that there's a world that they show up and they play really poorly. I don't think anyone should even entertain that. But if they come in here and they lose a close game at the Rose Bowl, does it make sense for him to want to come back? I said this after they lost to Michigan. It feels like he's hit his ceiling at Ohio State. It feels like the pressure of being the head coach at Ohio State is starting to really hit. And fans at Ohio State as well seem to be incredibly impatient with his inability to finish and to get things done in said matchups against Michigan. If they don't win a national title, to me, Blake, and this is why I keep pushing them to win it, they have every capability to do so. I don't know about you, but I just feel like if they can't win that title, they're aggressively falling short of expectations. And I don't know how things improve when they've got a roster like this and they couldn't get the job done.
So here's my thing. And in prep of this, I wanted to just point this out. Ryan Day is 3-3 in bowl, big New Year's Six are now playoff bowl games, right? He lost the Fiesta, but he won the Sugar Bowl, lost the national title. He won a Rose Bowl. He lost the Peach Bowl. He lost the Cotton Bowl, but the Peach Bowl was to the national champions. It was one of his only losses. The Cotton Bowl last year, they lost. But then he wins a first-round playoff game this year. Joe, he's 67-10. So I understand the expectations that are there. I understand what Ohio State fans are wanting to mean. But in reference to what you just said, I want to bring up three things on both sides. Okay, if he loses, it's going to be the same old, same old. He can't win the big game. He's overrated. And then the biggest thing is going to be, well, then what did you spend $20 million on? Because now you're messing with other people's money, right? Like you spent all this money to go get Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, and you went and got Will Howard, and you spent all the money through high school recruiting to go and get these guys, and then you're getting back to exactly where you've been finishing, right? Like everywhere you had been, you've been losing. You're losing to Oregon in these Fiesta Bowls 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So what are we talking about here? But here's the thing where I think for Ryan Day, whether you like him, love him, or hate him, things are not created equally. What happens if he wins? They're not gonna talk about Ryan Day. They're gonna say, well, Ohio State, they spent the money, and they have a national title type team.
Really good point.
It's not, nothing's going to change here for him. But I look at him and say, so wait a minute. He would blow out, Tennessee, and then if he wins, regardless if it's by one, Joe, they're going to be the national title front runner. The odds will come out from BetOnline, FanDuel, DraftKings, whoever. They're going to be the favorite to win the whole damn thing. It doesn't matter who else wins around them, because you look at Texas, you look at what they would have moving on from there. And you could arguably make the case that look at who they would have played: Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, then a national title. Joe, that run would be unprecedented. That would be an unprecedented type run for him to go on and win that. I think that I said this last week. I want to emphasize it again. I think they're only scratching the surface for how good they can be offensively. I know they're banged up. I think they could take it to another level. I am not in the camp, nor have I ever really been, instead of him losing games he shouldn't have. I don't think he's overrated. Like, everybody says that, well, Ohio State recruits itself. No, it doesn't. I've seen blue blood programs hire a wrong coach.
Yes.
And it goes flat. Like, what are you talking about? So I think for Ryan Day, he can't win the big one. He's overrated, and you spend all that money. But I don't think even if he wins that people come back to the drawing board on him. He's 67-10. And that's the biggest. I get it. He's lost 10 games. But, Joe, he's lost 2 games every single year since 2021, most of them coming in the playoff. So, look, undefeated seasons are very rare. Saban only did it, what, twice? In 20 years? What are we trying to do here? By the way, his underling, the guy that he molded to do the same exact thing, in the same exact time he's done it once.
Well, I don't think anyone was calling
team and defense to do it.
I don't think anyone was calling for him to go undefeated. It has more to do with them not reaching the Big Ten championship game. Them not okay.
They were in there. Well, no, they weren't in there last year. But yeah, you're right.
But this is the way that I think you depicted that. I think is perfect because, and this is why I was so annoyed by Kirk Herbstreit being so pissy about this and trying to call out the fans for being, so lunatic crazy about the expectations and the media for reacting the way that they did. There's a discussion to be had on both sides. And that's what this has just made it so bizarre to track, and also just from somebody in the media compelling to analyze both sides of the spectrum. For what you just talked about, he's been highly successful. But for the expectation, and having just seen Urban Meyer win a national title before him, for them to not have accomplished that, I think is where that frustration from Ohio State fans comes into play. I still believe as long as they get to the national championship game, all of those concerns get quieted. You bring up a very interesting point of, do Ohio State fans and does the national media say and try to move the goalposts and go, well, yeah, they were supposed to get to the national championship game. They were supposed to beat Oregon. They just didn't win the game that mattered the most against Michigan. Is this really Ryan Day, or is it just him having the resources to recruit at a high level and their roster prevailed? There are going to be arguments that say that. Again, it all plays into the insanity of the narrative. But if he does end up getting there, I think that he's not buying himself grace, because his buyout's too big for them to fire him. They're not going to move on. They're not going to bring in Vrabel. None of that stuff's going to happen, as much as it would be crazy to see. But I think that
shouldn't do it. That's dumb.
Right. I just think where this comes into play more, and who has the most say in what happens, it's not the Ohio State administration. They're not going to just get rid of him for that. It comes down to, what does Ryan Day want to do? Does Ryan Day just feel so burnt out from dealing with all of this crap and all of the negative feedback from fans and the inability to beat Michigan that he thinks that he should test the waters in the NFL, or he should test the waters at another school? Is that how this ends up shaping up? That is what's, the biggest part to track with this. And if they reach a national title, I would think that he's going to feel a little bit better about his situation.
Well, hold on now. I'm going to defend him on this. and this is a hard truth. And here is the hard truth. Jim Tressel got to multiple BCS bowls, got to multiple BCS national titles. He got to 3 of them and lost 2 of them. He's 1 and 2 in national title games.
Yeah.
Let's go to Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer won 1 national title at Ohio State. How long?
He wasn't there for that long. He wasn't there for that long.
8 years. He was there about 8 years.
Let me check. I think you're right.
So, I mean, he won 1. So this is not just a Ryan Day situation here. This isn't just a Ryan Day.
It was 6 years. He was 2012 to 2018.
Okay. So he won 1. Okay. One of the greatest coaches that we've seen. Mm-hmm. Okay. The bottom line, though, is that Ohio State has failed on expectations far before Ryan Day even got there. I remember in 2007 when they got absolutely blasted by LSU. I was there. Spare me. Okay. This has been a problem for them long before Ryan Day even got there.
I wouldn't classify it as a problem, but there is at least. Okay.
It is a problem. Hold on. They've gotten to multiple big time games as a program, and they've lost on national stages outside of Ryan Day. You can't tell me it's not a problem when you're getting to the national stage and losing.
I would just like to reclassify that as it's not as to win a national title is a ridiculously hard feat. There are good teams every single year. The way that you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, that like to assume an Ohio State head coach has to win a national title is extremely ridiculously lofty expectations. But to the point you're making here of Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel, and then John Cooper was the head coach before that for a long period of time. And, Woody Hayes was there for as long as he was. You should at least be able to reach national titles and win 1. That's where I think the frustration comes from Ohio State.
He did get to a national title. He just ran in that 2020 Bama team.
Right.
What if he gets to another? I mean, like, there's parts of me that asks, like, this isn't over yet. Like, listen, I know that they hate Michigan. The Ohio State fans hate Michigan. I get it. It's a massive rival. I lose to Michigan every year if it means I'm playing for a national title. Sorry.
I didn't realize John Cooper didn't win a national title, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there. And somebody put in the chat here, John Cooper 2.0. And maybe that's what this is that it ends with a 12-year run.
He's going to win one. I'm going to tell you, I'm bullish on them right now.
I am too. Any Ohio State fans who stumble upon this but didn't listen to our Ohio State preview, I think that they're going to beat Oregon, and which is why I really want to revisit this conversation. If they beat Oregon,
they're winning a national title.
Yeah, I really want to redo this segment after the Oregon game. Like, this is how entrenched and how deep this is and how complex this is. I can't think of, Blake, a narrative surrounding a head coach that has ever been built like this. Because at the very least, when you've got coaches that have these very deep rivalries, Brian Kelly when he was at Notre Dame or any LSU coach or Alabama coach, they would end up splitting against one another. They would end up having matchups where they would knock each other off, and then winning those games would set them up for national titles. We don't have the inverse of an Ohio State team that was on the trajectory to win a national championship and to get to a national championship game, losing to a Michigan team that had nothing to play for. That's where the whole thing just becomes an S show.
Yeah, listen, to wrap this up for me, they're not going to give Ryan Day his credit.
No, so I don't think so either.
If he beats Tennessee and Oregon, I think that they're going to beat Texas. I think that they'd ultimately be the favorite, and then what? And God forbid he gets to a national title game and he loses to Georgia. What's your point? Like what would be your point at that? Okay, right. So he went through the hardest way to get there, and they fell up short to a team that we both thought would be in the national title game to start off with. Like, it is what it is. I am not in the camp of fire Ryan Day. I think you're too foolish to think that you should fire him. Who are you going to get? Vrabel?
Well, again, I don't think that – I really don't think that they fire him because his buyout is enormous. This is not a Texas A&M situation where they're going to just be like, screw it, we're going to throw a bunch of oil money at this and he's going to be done. And Jimbo Fisher getting pushed out the door was a lot different of a circumstance. It was very, very different because of the underperformance of them just straight up not winning games. you need some sort of a valid reason to get rid of him. The only way that this marriage ends, is that if it's a John Calipari type of a circumstance where the frustration kicks in from said coach and he's just like, I can't take this anymore. I need to move on and start fresh. There's a lot of times, if you talk to people in coaching, that a lot of people believe that like after 10 seasons, eventually it is time to restart. If you can't accomplish what you're trying to accomplish at one school.
You're going to be there longer 10 years because he was a coordinator.
Right. He's been there for a really long time.
Right. We'll see, man. Let's let the season play out here. Okay. So, Joe, speaking of the playoff, there was some big news, pun intended, for Notre Dame. Rylie Mills, who got hurt in that Indiana game, is going to be out for the remainder of the season. You probably could shed light a little bit more on what the injury may be. But turning to the playoff and turning to Rylie Mills here, how big of a loss is it for Notre Dame, a guy that had 7.5 sacks this season for the Irish?
Yeah, when we did this preview, I was coming into the game thinking that like, oh, Rylie Mills is available. The injury that he suffered in the game didn't look crazy significant. 10 days, he'd be back. He's done. He's out of the mix. Notre Dame fans, I think we need to understand here, this is a huge deal. Notre Dame's path to success came off of the fact that their run defense was going up against an offensive line that had a ton of problems against a lot of teams that had competent big body defensive tackles in run blocking. They had a lot of issues. That's what we highlighted in the preview. Rylie Mills, in the second half of the season, when there was a stretch where they were without Howard Cross, he was one of the best defensive tackles in the country. Yeah. He was creating like serious penetration. He was getting pressures on passing downs, and he was immovable against the run. Not having him is a problem, and it goes even deeper than that. They have dealt with a ton of injuries at different spots on their defensive line. They lost Jordan Botelho, who was an edge. They lost Abubakar Traore, who was an edge. Bryce Young stepped up and has been a good player for them, but they're having to throw in another guy, Gabriel Rubio, who isn't a primary starter. I just think that like the timing of this really sucks. It wouldn't surprise me, and I'm not saying that like, boom, Notre Dame's screwed. They lose the football game. They're out of this. They're done. But if Georgia has a lot of success running the ball compared to what we were expecting, it wouldn't surprise me. And if they run the ball well, that is how Georgia wins the football game, because then there ultimately would be less pressure on Gunnar Stockton.
Well, I was literally going to ask you, because you picked Notre Dame to beat Georgia, and I was, again, going to ask, does this loss change your mindset?
It doesn't, because I'm not going to bail on my team. It's just like if you were picking LSU in a close game and there's a hope that they would win the game. I'm still sticking with it because Al Golden's a great defensive coordinator, and we just don't know what the heck's happening with Gunnar Stockton. I said this before. I don't know if Gunnar Stockton can't come into this game and play at an unreal level and take over, or if he has the first time starting jitters and makes mistakes going up against a secondary that's going to get an interception off of him. I just don't know.
So here's my thing. I've seen a lot of people talk about how big of an impact it is from a production standpoint. You can't take that away. I mean, look, Rylie Mills, 37 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. You can't take that physicality and production away. But here's where I look at this and see that it's a massive deal for a bigger aspect. Rylie Mills has played in 61 games in college. He's been there since 2020. He's a 5-year senior. 61 games, Joe, he's played in. Brother, you don't replace that experience. So I see all of these people talking about Notre Dame could do this, and this for production. You're missing the entire point of what makes this kid very solid. It's that he's played in 61 freaking football games in college. The experience factor is always a big deal. Versus when I look at Gabe Rubio, who you brought up earlier. Gabe Rubio's not a bad player and could be a very good player, and he's been there since 2021. He's played in 30 games. Joe, one guy has doubled the experience of action than his replacement. Now, of course he does. I mean, that's what starters do, right? It's got to happen that way. Rylie Mills, would have been a very big piece in a Notre Dame win because of the issues that Georgia's had in the interior and exterior run games. It's a massive deal. Yeah. And I got to tell you, I'm really interested to see how Georgia attacks Notre Dame, number one, because we don't really know what a game plan from Georgia with a new quarterback looks like. I guarantee you running the football is the number one key of that game plan, though. I don't have to be a rocket scientist. I don't have to be Elon Musk. I don't have to be the college version of Elon Musk when it comes to talking football to understand Georgia's big game plan is going to be revolved around running the football, right? Like, we all know this. I see everybody talking about the production, and I agree. 7.5 sacks gone is a big deal from the position that he plays. You cannot replace 60-point games played. I mean, Joe, like, this guy's what, 23, 24? Right.
I want to say he's 23, but he's like a fifth-year guy. He's been around for a minute.
That's my point. Like, again, you have a 23-year-old guy that is saying what exactly? Everything. I say this about players that are this old around the country. There's nothing that he hasn't seen yet. Name one thing that Rylie Mills hasn't seen.
Right.
Since a coaching change, your DC, the guy that was leading you, getting the head coaching job, losing to Marshall, losing to NIU. He's been there through all the obstacles. He is a leader on the field, and that is the biggest thing for me of what's going on here.
Yeah, I think that we're on the same page here. I'm not trying to be like doom and gloom and say Notre Dame's screwed. That's not the way that I'm
not
going
trying
at
to
this.
say that either. I'm not
right. I know you're not, and I know you're not, and but to like level set in like what you're talking about, Notre Dame fans, you can't downplay this. You just can't. You can't just think that like, well, Gabriel Rubio is a great player and he's been rotational. It's not like we're throwing another true freshman into the mix. We have to then think further down the line of, I don't even know off the top of my head, and it doesn't seem like it's been super clear of who then is filling Gabriel Rubio's role. Who are the next guys up? Because now Notre Dame is relying on a lot of young players who, albeit have been playing at a ridiculously high level, and we love getting to see Leonard Moore and Christian Gray shine to the degree, and Bryce Young step in and shine to that degree. Drake Bowen's another young player who has played at a really great level. It's nice seeing these young players be the reason for Notre Dame's success. But at a certain point, when half of your defense is inexperienced guys and you have that many freshmen on the field, a coach like Kirby Smart takes advantage of that. Right. I don't think that this leads to, as I'm reiterating, I don't think this leads to Georgia running for 200 yards and Notre Dame screwed. That's not going to happen. Their defensive success hasn't only been from Rylie Mills, but it's going to show up in third and short. It's going to show up in areas where Rylie Mills, the 300-pound, 6'5" frame that he had that was necessary to overpower Tate Ratledge and Dylan Fairchild, to overpower those guys, it's going to show up in spots where we're going to be watching the game going like, man, I really wish Mills was in on that play.
Is this, I don't know this, so I'm asking you, is this going to be Gabe Rubio's first start?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but he has played significant minutes and he's an upperclassman. So this isn't
again, he's only played in 8 games. So those significant minutes had to come in some pretty big drop time.
No, he's been a rotational guy. Like, he hasn't been just purely.
My point is when it's a close game, he's not seen a lot of action. Correct?
I don't believe that's the case. I don't think they rotate a lot of defensive linemen, so it's not like just purely, Rylie Mills is in there every single snap.
Well, regardless,
I also think he was banged up at the beginning of the year too, if I remember correctly.
Now let's just say hypothetically it's his second or third start, even if it is his first, regardless of what it is. His first start over.
Yeah, he hasn't started before. This is his first start.
So your first start is against Tate Ratledge.
Yeah.
Good luck. I mean, good luck. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is in the country. I mean, that's a perennial NFL guard that you're going up against in your first start. And to your point, you bring up probably the best point in all of this, and I didn't even think about it, and that's why I'm glad I got you on here. Depth. Like, depth is always an issue in these kinds of games, especially if Georgia wants – Joe, they ran the ball 60% more and when Stockton or Gunnar Stockton came in than they have all year. They ran the football. Joe, they ran 54 plays. They ran it 40 plus. Like, they hadn't done that all year. So now you're going to have to try to convince me that their game plan is not going to be trying to attack that. It's going to be interesting. But again, the production, the 7.5 sacks, it's a massive loss. You can't take that away. Yeah. But the number one thing for me, man, 61 games Rylie Mills has played in. That's you don't replace that. Like if you injected truth serum into Marcus Freeman and he says, tell me really about the Rylie Mills miss. I know for one thing he's going to say in there, in his own words, I can't replace the experience on the field. Nobody can. Nobody can. That's the big deal here.
The final thought on this, it doesn't even, for me, it doesn't even have anything to do with that sack production, the tackle for loss production that you're talking about. It's what just this big-bodied mauler that he is on film. He's freeing up the linebackers. He's freeing up Howard Cross, who is the quick-footed 3-tech that is an impactful pass rusher. Like that, he was creating so much spillover effect. Having a big mauling presence like that is huge on a defense like Notre Dame's that has athletes all over the field. To what we're talking about here, Rubio does need to play well, and I'm trying to figure out. I've been texting with people closer that track Notre Dame a little bit closer than I do to find out like who is that next guy behind Rubio. It's been unclear because they haven't really turned to many other guys unless it's been in garbage time. Going
to be interesting to see. I just think that of all the positions besides quarterback and Jeremiah Love that you could have lost, this is against this opponent. It's probably the worst that you could have had in this current situation. Hopefully Rylie Mills is able to bounce back. This absolutely stinks for him. It was an ACL, wasn't it?
Knee injury was what I saw, so I believe that's it. It's crazy because it looked like he just got like leg whipped. It didn't really look like it was anything that bad. And we watched the game, and they're saying like, oh, he walked off on his own power, and then you're like, oh, he'll be back.
I walked off.
I know that was the stupidest the thing that like we all forget.
Look, as someone who's gone through 2 ACL, like if I could hawk this big leg up here, I'd show you like the patella tendon graft. Like right here, brother. It hurts, man.
Yeah.
It hurts. You were making that face like you probably shouldn't put your big ass leg up here. But
no. It's like having torn a tendon. I tore my pec when I was playing.
It's not fun. Well, you can walk. I mean, there's so much structure around there, but it's just like you can't cut. You can't. It really stinks. That's why you guys need. Does Notre Dame have artificial turf?
They do. They switched to artificial turf. Well, they were the longest time were like super proud of their grass and everything, and I don't know why they switched to turf.
Everybody I know, man. Everybody I know. That stupid artificial turf. Okay. Yeah. Speaking about Notre Dame, Joe, they win the transfer portal and got 2 wide receivers, Will Pauling and Malachi Fields. Let's start off with Will Pauling from Wisconsin. Your thoughts on the addition there from the transfer portal for the Irish?
Yeah, well, so with both of them, Notre Dame needed to be aggressive this portal haul to get and bring in receivers. It has been something that the past couple of cycles we've talked about. They've been a little underwhelming at recruiting receiver, and they've got a couple of young guys in the fold. Like Cam Coleman's a guy that, or no, not Cam Coleman. I'm freaking blanking on his name. I'm gonna look it up in a second. But they've got 4 or 5-star receivers that were a part of the last recruiting class that could step up. They needed explosive playmakers. They just need something. We saw that they didn't get any production against Indiana outside of Jordan Faison. They didn't have anybody to turn to. Will Pauling, I'm not the biggest fan of bringing him in because I just feel like he plays into the mold of a group of guys that they already have that didn't generate much production. He's supposed to be a 4-3 guy. He's somebody who's going to operate and win a little bit more out of the slot. Where I'm the most excited is them getting Malachi Fields from Virginia, Blake, because they haven't had a guy like this, a 6'4", 220+ pound guy that wins at the catch point. Notre Dame hasn't had somebody who has the production of a Malachi Fields in the ACC. If you look at Malachi Fields' production this year in some of their bigger opponents, he had 129 yards against Louisville, which has a good secondary. He had a touchdown and 65 yards against Clemson. He had 81 yards against Notre Dame's great secondary. So Fields is where the player I'm the most excited about. If at the end of next season, we're going, wow, what an underrated portal get. My last piece on this before I let you jump in here, I'm being a lot more conservative about expectations for what happens with these Notre Dame receiver additions because I was really excited about Chris Mitchell, and Chris Mitchell didn't do shit this year. What makes me feel a little bit better is that Chris Mitchell was playing at FIU, and both these guys were playing against tougher opponents and have production against Power 4 opponents.
Well, hold on now. You're going to have a quarterback that can throw the ball a little bit better than Rylie Leonard.
Right. It's either going to be Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr that's going to be playing quarterback.
CJ Carr. Okay. Let's pull the Band-Aid off of this. Okay.
Well, yeah, like he's been dealing with some undisclosed like elbow issues. So, like, I don't know what the heck is going on with him.
Well, that's even worse. Okay. Regardless. This ain't all on Mitchell. This isn't all on Bo Collins. Like, let's even rewind it back to the Indiana game. Joe, was 3rd and 4, and what happened? They run a slant route. Bo Collins lays out. He can't hold on to the football, but he's laying out to try to catch a quick slant. Okay. Will Pauling, I know you're not a big fan of him, but let me defend him to this.
It's not that I'm a big fan. I just don't think his play style fits with what Notre Dame needed. They've got a lot of guys already like him.
Sometimes when can I be frank with you? Your play style right now, receivers not winning you games anyway. You might have to go outside the box. You did go outside the box. I mean, Will Pauling, for what it's worth, Joe, he had 74 catches in the Big Ten in 23 when he had a stable, but it was stabilized at quarterback. Joe, I'll be real with you. When LSU played Wisconsin 2 years ago in the bowl game, Will Pauling was the best offensive weapon that they had.
Yeah.
It wasn't remotely close, okay? Can you get him back to that production? Now, when Tyler Van, what's his name?
Tyler Van Dyke and
Van Dyke went down.
Braden Locke was the kid who filled in for him.
Kid barely had catches. Joey, I went and looked this up. He had 42 catches, okay, this season. 21 of them came before the Van Dyke went down. So over half of his production came in 4 games. That's insanity. That's plain insanity. Now, I understand what you're saying, but here's the truth that I'm gonna throw your way. Receiver is a fickle recruiting haul. Let me tell you why. Mm-hmm. Until you start having dudes that have severe production, they're not going to your school. Somebody's gonna have to break out, dude. I will tell you. Like, listen, the place that I talk about all the time. What is the number one thing that they have? Look at the 4 receivers that are in the league right now. Brian Thomas, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors. What do they all have in common? It took the one guy in Odell to burst out, and then everybody wanted to come here. Until somebody comes out, you're going to be stuck with guys like you're going to have to continue to go in the portal. However, Malachi Fields is a dude. So if you can get him the football in one-on-one situations, he's fast enough, he's strong enough, he can make contested catches. He high points the football really well. He did it against you, and you know what happened. Marcus Freeman, he kept catching passes on Notre Dame, and he goes, "Let's start tampering."
Okay, all right. Stop it. We're not doing. You always love to do that shit.
The thing about Fields that's interesting to me: 55 catches, 808 yards. The last 2 years, he's been at 800 yards, around 55 catches, and 5 touchdowns. Very consistent. The question for a guy like Fields is, can he take that next step? Now, the last thing I'm going to throw in here. Okay. Brand new quarterback with an O-line that some will be coming back. I wouldn't expect fireworks early. I wouldn't, even with them. So I think that you got 2 solid players. I don't know if they can take you to where you want to go, though.
Okay, so this is where, by the way, Cam Williams was the freshman that I always mix up Cam Coleman and Cam Williams. They were part of the same.
What happened to the Greathouse kid? Greathouse can't play anymore?
No, he's been playing. It's just they haven't gotten production out of these guys. I think the big thing to talk about here with bringing in Pauling and Fields is that you're bringing in 2 guys that are premier athletes that play unique roles. Pauling has potential. I just think that there's a lot of guys of his physical profile already on this Notre Dame roster. He's 5'10". And he's apparently a 4.3 guy. He was on Feldman's freak list. You already have guys like Faison, who's already got that build, who is already in a contributing role. Where does he play in the mix? He's more of a slot guy than. Okay.
I'll tell you, as someone who saw Denbrock do this multiple times, Denbrock wants to go underneath shot, underneath shot. It's like clockwork. When you have to decide if you're going to take away a drag or a quick in or a slant or a boundary hitch, okay, you have to then, as a safety, pick one or the other. It's exactly what he did against with Jaden last year. Okay, are you going to take away the quick hitch with Kyron Lacy, or are you going to take away Malik Neighbors? So what happened? They started taking away Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, clearly. So what happened? You had 4 games in the beginning of the year where Kyron Lacy's going off. Why? He's going off because you got to decide what you're going to do. Joe, there's no counteract for speed. None. And as someone who saw, and look, this is just an observation. Considering the guy that committed on our show, meaning AYS, and having conversations, Denbrock's complete philosophy is that he wants a big body and then he wants speed.
Well, right. So this is, and you said, does it ultimately get them where they're trying to go? I don't think that these 2 moves automatically solve the problem. And they're like, boom, you've gotten a 1,000-yard and an 800-yard receiver that Notre Dame hasn't had in a long time. That's 100% what's going to happen. I think that it's a year-by-year progression. It's a year-by-year improvement. Denbrock wasn't there in time last year to really have a mold and a say in building this receiver room. And the guys that they had, to what you're talking about, weren't able to be deployed to the degree that Notre Dame was hoping that they were. I think is what we're talking about here is that if Bo Collins can be a 500-600-yard receiver, or not Bo Collins, if Will Pauling can be a 500-600-yard receiver this upcoming season, which is a little bit better than this past year, and he's going to be playing in a better offense, that he's not going to be the only receiver that's getting targeted. And if Malachi Fields can be that go-to option on the sideline and in contested catch situations at 6'4", 220, that if you need him on 3rd down and 7, we can rely on that. That is what Notre Dame has not had. They just haven't had a go-to option that, like, man, it's 3rd and 8. Who is going to get open and who do we trust to come down with the football? That's where the difference comes into play. They don't need to take these grand steps forward. Just let me finish. They don't need to take these grand steps forward. They just need to show continual signs of improvement on a year-to-year basis. That's where this gets better.
I got to defend Notre Dame. I can't believe I'm the one in here defending Notre Dame. BS. Because I saw Bo Collins getting open on 3rd and 7s against Indiana, against Louisville, against other teams, and Rylie Leonard can't get him the football.
It's more on the receipt. Rylie Leonard did his best job of actually reading the field that he's done most of the season.
An Indiana game. We talked about this in the post.
No, it's on the receivers, man. It's on the receivers.
Bo Collins is diving for the football. That's not on him. I am sorry. I'm sorry. That is bullshit.
Bo Collins was not good this year, dude, and he was fine in the Indiana game. I know that every throw wasn't perfect.
Joe, you can't look at 3rd down production and Rylie Leonard having a 17%, 18%, whatever it was, completion percentage different on 3rd down than where he is everywhere else, and say that it's all on the receiving core. Sorry.
I'm not saying it's all on the receiving core. I know that Rylie Leonard hasn't been perfect, but at the same time, like, they did not have a receiver that was reliable. The only guy that was reliable in the Indiana game, and the only reason why he suddenly returned to form was because he was battling an ankle injury and was suddenly back to health, was Jordan Faison. He's the only guy that I'm excited about. The rest of the group is a bit underwhelming. Greathouse could eventually turn into a good player, and Cam Williams is somebody to track.
What happens when a quarterback hits the receiver in the chest instead of him having to dive in on crucial 3rd and downs in the red zone?
That's also going to be very important. And they have 2 guys that are going to be much better at that.
I'm never going to get on a receiver when a ball's missed on 3rd and 7 and you're having to throw the ball 7 to 10 yards.
These guys aren't creating consistent separation, though. So, like, I'm not going to sit here and act like
when they are people. Do you think Pauling can't?
Pauling can.
Okay. Pauling, well, you better find someone that can throw him the football. That's all I'm going to say. You know a guy who can throw the football?
Who's that?
Fernando Mendoza. So Fernando Mendoza from Cal has been very interesting. You know, the last time I saw Fernando Mendoza is when they had Cal had the big comeback, and he said, "We did it for the boys. I love Cal." And then all of a sudden now he's in the transfer portal and go to Notre Dame. Indiana, sorry. We just got done talking about Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But your thoughts on Fernando Mendoza, who I thought showed some really good play this year for Cal.
He's a really underrated player that was in the portal, and there's a reason why I think a lot of casuals don't realize this, that weren't tracking things. Most sites had him as 2nd, 3rd ranked quarterback in the portal. There weren't a ton of great options this year. he's a tremendous athlete. He's got a pretty good arm. For what he was working with at Cal, to have the offensive production that they did, to play the way that they did against Miami, he's a tremendous player. I think the best angle here to look at this, they needed to figure out a bounce back and who to move, not bounce back, but who is going to be next after Curtis Rourke. I look at the success that Curtis Rourke had at Indiana, and I see a lot of trait similarities for what Fernando Mendoza can produce this upcoming year. They also got a really underrated addition of Roman Hemby, who is a dynamic receiver coming from Maryland, receiving back coming from Maryland, who's going to be worked into the fold. We saw how Indiana used their running backs. He's a better athlete than Ellison and Lawton. He could be really productive this upcoming year. When we talked about Indiana, there are comparisons that could be made to what TCU did 2 years ago. TCU 2 years ago, after their run, they underwhelmed a bit in recruiting. They didn't go into the portal and bring in any big bodies over the past couple of seasons, any big names that really sparked things. The fact that they're already doing this, getting two premier Power 4 guys and not just plucking from the G5, I think this is a positive sign. I won't give a sweeping, crazy take to say that Indiana is going to replicate what they did this year. There's going to be probably a tougher schedule. They're not going to go to the Big Ten championship game. But for them to be a consistent 9-win, floor of 8-win team in the Big Ten is accomplishable when they're able to do this kind of a move in portal recruiting. Mendoza is going to be a really good player, and it wouldn't stun me if he's not one of the better ones in the country next year.
All right. So Fernando Mendoza is an interesting case because here's the thing. He solves two problems. Here's the problems he solves. Number one, he's got 2 years, right? So he can be there at Indiana for 2 years. So even if you do slip a little bit in a situation, he's shown growth. And let me explain it like this. The big thing that I look at young quarterbacks is one big key statistic. Number one, did your completion percentage go up? And then number two, did you start eliminating turnovers? Okay. Going into year 2 at Cal, okay, he had around 5.7% better completion percentage. So what does that mean? Okay, it doesn't seem like a lot, but Joe, that's an extra 17, 18. No, my math's off. That's another 55 completions. Like that's insanity. Number two, he had 10 interceptions as a freshman. He cut it down to 6. And that's the thing is the more snaps this kid got, the better he got, clearly. I think Fernando Mendoza is somebody that Indiana could fit into their system based on what we saw off of Cal. He may have some better weapons. He'll definitely have some better coaching around him.
Yeah.
The thing with Indiana, though, for me is I think this kid can be good. I think he's better than Curtis Rourke, quite honestly. Joe, until they start getting dudes up front that can play, it doesn't matter. They can put up 45 against the Rudy Poo Techs of the world. The question is going to become for Indiana, as good as this young man is can they run the ball in crucial situations? That's what it comes down to ultimately. I think it's a big addition. I think not only is it a big addition, I think it's an upgrade to what you have.
Yes. Yeah.
So Fernando Mendoza, I think, showed that he can play. Look, man, you brought up the Miami game, and I just want to point this out. When we talked about and broke down the Miami game after Cal lost it, Frankie Mendoza or Fernando Mendoza did not lose that game for them. I'm thinking of the Sandlot with Frankie Mendoza.
It was their defense.
It was their defense. The dude was making play after play after play after play. So I think it's an upgrade. The question now becomes, how does Indiana respond around him, which will be the big key.
Last part about this, one might assume watching this kid play this year and make these big plays, oh, this is a guy that's got 1 year of eligibility left. He's a redshirt sophomore. So they're getting likely.
He's good. No, he's just a junior. He didn't redshirt.
This says redshirt
Right?
sophomore on the Cal page.
Okay,
So
well, he may be.
He might actually even be younger. Yeah, wait, this is.
Yeah, no, he's going to be a true junior.
No. Okay, so 2022 he redshirted, 2023
fair.
freshman year, and then this was his redshirt sophomore year.
Okay, fair.
So but regardless, he has 2 more years of eligibility left. So this isn't just like a quick plug and play. Assuming that he doesn't try to jump and go to the next job, I don't think he's going to be like fully developed to make that transition to the NFL right away. There are some people that think that this is, an underrated guy on NFL circles if he does take that step forward because he's big framed kid, good runner. This is a multi-year process. I just think that as much as we've lauded Kurt Cignetti, this is a really positive sign. You're not going to be Sonny Dykes, who it's a flash in the pan, and then it's a slow regression year by year. The positive sign of bringing in two offensive playmakers like this to get that improvement you just talked about is where the results can pan out and that they get even better. I'm really curious to see what they do in 2024, though, or 2025.
Big step for him. Again, he went from 14 to 10 to 16 and 6. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, and he's going to have better weapons than Indiana, that's for sure. All right, let's wrap it up here. Joe, there are some bowl games that are coming up, and to wrap the show up today, your thoughts on what games that you're looking for?
Well, you mentioned the Birmingham Bowl, I believe what it was, which is played tomorrow between Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt. Not a lot of guys bailed on that game, so I think that one's going to be really fun to track. And then the other one that I have that's also on Friday that I think is a chaos play. If you're willing to stay up late at 10:30 to watch USC play Texas in the
I put that one down too. Okay. I put it down too.
This game is a mess because there's also a lot of opt-outs, some opt-outs defensively for Texas A&M. USC lost all these players.
but other than their big elaborate guys, there's not a lot though.
Right. I'm just bringing this up because it's like, how the hell do both of these teams play? This either could be a crazy ass game with just some random players that pop off. Like I think that's got the all-time chaos play here. The last one that I want to bring up, of course, I got to bring up the Pop-Tart Bowl. Iowa State versus Miami.
You took all right. You took all my balls.
Okay. All right. Well, what do you think of those games though? Because those are both. I think all those would be great.
Georgia Tech and Vandy. Literally, look. It's all 3 that I wrote down here. Can you see? Birmingham Bowl, Vegas Bowl, Pop-Tart Bowl. Okay. So we did not like plan this. All right. The Birmingham Bowl is probably going to be the funnest bowl to me because number one, I wonder what the morale, win, lose, or draw for Vandy is that Diego Pavia can come back. That's number one. Number two, on the opposite side of that, here's a hot take going into 2025. Is Georgia Tech a sleeper contender in the ACC? If they because they lost Singleton. Their Haynes King's going to be gone. I just don't know. Singleton couldn't get separation against Georgia. It's a completely different situation in reference to who they are. Sleeper contender.
Okay, all right. Continue. Sorry.
Look, man. Georgia Tech. What do they look like with Brent Key at year 3? What do they look like?
It's fair.
This dude they've been nothing but consistent development at Georgia Tech. Can Vandy come close to replicating the success that they had this year? I think that's a fun physical bowl game, and I'm really looking forward to it. Vegas Bowl, A&M USC. A&M about to clap them cheeks. It's about to get bad. Because here's what I know about A&M. Even though they had a massive turnover and you have Scoreton not playing, other guys not playing, whatever. Dude, did you see the guys that they have back that are backups that are starting for the first time in this game?
Well, that's what makes it compelling is they've got some young guys that could show out.
Well, who's going to run the ball for USC? Because their running backs are gone. Both of them. Joyner and Marks are out. Who's going to run the football? Who's going to put their right tackles at Auburn? Who's going to be their right tackle?
Right.
Joe, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. And you know what I thought about in this bowl game? It might be a litmus test to see how bad USC really is.
Well, that's why I'm really compelled by it because you're going up against some backups for A&M, and then we're placed in this situation too that how good is the recruiting that Lincoln Riley's done? Because he's going to have to rely on 4th, 5th receivers. Can Maeva, Puller, Miller, Moss, and just go out there and ball out despite the expectation that they're going to stink? It could either be a blowout or it could be a really crazy barn burner that happens at 1 a.m.
It does. It's going to be interesting. And then you talk about the Pop-Tart Bowl. Anything revolving Pop-Tarts is going to get my attention.
I knew that was coming.
That's what she said. I mean, Iowa State, Miami. How does Miami respond? I think Miami thought that they were the best team in the ACC, and because of a stupid tiebreaker, they're out. I mean, look, it is what it is. And listen, this is what's interesting about these games, Joe. This is how I've been watching all of them, or why I've been watching all of them. Two things. Number one, it gives me a baseline without you being in the portal. Like with the portal additions, it gives me a baseline of where I know where you are. Right? Like I don't think it gets much worse than a lot of these teams and where they're at. So I at least have a baseline. But here's the thing. Literally when the game's over with, all of these teams are different. Like I'll give an example. Dude, there are midterm enrollees practicing for some of these teams already that are going to be in New Year Bowl games. So I'm just going to throw out a team that I know for a fact. Joe, they're starting DB room right now. Not even remotely close to being the same. They have a true freshman at boundary corner. I mean, I'll tell you, it's LSU, DJ Pickett, Mansour DeLeone. What am I supposed to look at that? But what if you missed in the portal in an area and a guy blossoms? I think that those are the things that fans need to see, and it's a good baseline of where you're at. All right. You guys have a good holiday season. We'll see you sporadically throughout. We'll be here during the playoffs. You guys know that. But we'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good day. Joe, you have a great Merry Christmas. I hope you get a whole bunch of gifts. I hope you get – by the way, guess what I got in my stocking yesterday?
What?
Coal.
That's what you get for being so mean to Notre Dame fans.
But it's coal, but they're like coal cookies. They're like it's like a joke. It's like a good gift. All right. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. Peace.